Hello everyone, JG here with my YouTube channel JG Movie, and today we're going to actually restart my series I'd hoped to do, kind of a long-running series on the USI MKS colonization systems along with USI life support. I'll actually be starting out by looking at a different mod, ScanSat, which is pretty much need it in order to find good places to colonize. So we'll start out by glancing at the ScanSat parts you saw some of in the opening cinematic. Alright. So the ScanSat mod adds 4 new parts, along with some different functionality for stock parts like the stock survey scanner. So we'll start over here with the biome scanner that you saw earlier in the cinematic. Comes with a nice little animation, and what this does is it makes a nice map of the biome of whatever planetary body you're scanning, so you can make sure to visit each biome to get all the science, and also makes a nice pretty looking map. This is an anomaly detector. It doesn't have any animation, doesn't extend, and it also doesn't give you any science. It just will paint all the anomalies on your ScanSat map, so you can make sure to visit all of them. This is a high-resolution altimetry and slope sensor. So what it's really handy for is finding a nice flat place to land your base if you're landing a big base or landing a lander that's not the most stable. So you can make sure to steer clear of big mountains and other areas like that. Or you can help you find big mountains if you're trying to land on a place where you need to be high up and able to, in order to get back into orbit. And this here is another slope and altimetry. It's a low resolution one, so it doesn't give you, I'll be able to show that to you in a second. It doesn't give you as high resolution as this guy over here, but the benefit with this is that these two sensors, the biome sensor and the low resolution radar, operate from about the same altitude, so you can put one probe into orbit and do both of these scans without having to change your altitude, which means you either have to do a second launch to do a high resolution scan, or you could go ahead and just change the elevation of your orbit, which would cost extra fuel. And then of course you have the stock survey scanner here, which is used to scan for resources. It does a low resolution scan for resources. So we'll retract all these. Alright, and then now we'll pop on over into our tracking station and take a look at a map I already did of the moon. So go ahead and focus over on the moon here. And you'll get a little ScanSat button in your toolbar here. Already have the moon map loaded up. It does take a second to load these big maps because they're higher resolution. So when you do your, didn't know resizing it. So when you do your biome scan, you'll get a nice, pretty map that looks like this. And you're also able to, once you find anomalies or you find spots you want to check out in a lander, you can use to set waypoints. The waypoint setting thing is a little bit buggy. I think it only works when you have whatever you're looking at loaded in a reference. So you're either looking at it in the tracking station or you're actually orbiting it or nearby it in a vessel. Otherwise, sometimes you'll see trying to set a waypoint. Oh, that one actually worked. Okay. But I have some of the anomalies already marked out here. So this is the biome map. If you go over here to map type, we'll go over to altimetry. It'll give you a different map with a grayscale version of altitude. And if you go ahead and right click, you can zoom in. You'll see how this is kind of pixelated. It's not really, doesn't give you a huge amount of detail. So that's the low resolution scan. And then slope, something similar. It just gives you a color representation of how steep the terrain is. Again, for this is a low resolution scan, so it's not going to give you a whole ton of detailed information as far as picking landing sites and that kind of thing. So we're going to hop back over into here. So I did a biome and low resolution altitude scan of the moon, so we haven't done Minmus yet, so we're going to go ahead and do that. That's what I showed you in the cinematic earlier. We'll open. So, yep, so this is the little thing I have. So the one thing about the ScanSat is that the parts do use a fair amount of electric charge when they're running, and they're fairly big data-wise if you want to transmit them back to the Space Center. So you want to make sure you have a good amount of solar power panels and batteries to keep them running. There, so there's that. So go ahead and launch this guy. I do use MechJeb as well. As you can probably see, just for Delta V stuff. I'm filming this in a wider screen, so the edges are probably going to be cropped off for you guys. And also it helps me, especially when I'm recording and I have a bunch of other windows and stuff open, automate some of the things so it's a little bit easier to run with my cramped screen. And I'm bad at games, so it also helps that. So we'll just do orbital inclination is 0 to start out, and we'll just do an inclination change. There's plenty of delta V built into this. I have to fix my staging. Make sure all that's good. That one. That down there. That there. That. Cool. Alrighty. Lift off. Some of these other parts, I think this engine mounting plate here, mostly just because it looks cool, is from BlueDog, which I'll do another video on soon. They have a lot of real-life inspired parts that look really cool. They're awesome texture work. They have like Apollo parts and Gemini parts and Mercury parts and all kinds of other early space program parts. I wanted to make this series a little while ago, but then around the springtime, probably early spring, well, still the winter, there was a bunch of updates released for Kerbal Space Program one after the other, and it kind of broke a bunch of my mods, and I kept switching back and forth between versions, and my game kept breaking over and over again. I originally wanted to do this series in Galileo's Planet Pack, but Copernicus is still broken with the newer versions of the game, so I figured we could do stock to start out, and maybe I'll do a Galileo's Planet Pack version later on, which is a really fun planet pack. It adds a lot of variety as far as planets go and makes the solar system much bigger. And just about to run out of juice on the first stage here. I'll make sure for the cinematics next time to disable the atmospheric effects, because it causes lots of gross redness that's all the way through the rocket when you're trying to do fancy cinematics. Dropping our first stage there, switching over to the second stage. Just use one of these, the Vector liquid fuel engines. These engine plates here that I really like, I think they're from the Making History expansion, so it's another little bonus part that you get. They make the shrouds match up much more evenly between your stages, so you don't have the little goofy tiny shroud in between your two rocket stages. Go ahead and deploy this. We're out of the atmosphere. Deploy that. Our solar panels automatically go. I think these solar panels they're either from BlueDog, which some of the rocket parts are from, or they're from Making Alternate History, which I'll be showcasing on another episode a little bit later. So just circularizing our orbit here. And that MechJeb ascent guidance is pretty darn handy, and it speeds up your playthrough, especially if you're doing lots of launches and trying to build things off-world. The landing guidance, on the other hand, is a different story. It's a little bit wonky and doesn't land you anywhere near the target where you select to land, and you end up crashing half the time. But the ascent guidance works really well, and it's a handy tool to have. So we'll go ahead, we'll hop on over to our map view. We're going to go over to Minmus since we haven't scanned that one yet with these. Set it as our target. I'll have to match planes with the target first since Minmus is at a slightly different inclination than Kerbin and the Moon are. So we'll execute the next node there. And I do have one more stage left on this rocket. There's this much smaller stage here. I think the engine in here, it's a modded version. Yeah, it comes with a little extra bonus fuel. I think that's a missing history mod. I complained about why my game was broken for so long after KSP got updated, and it's probably because I have way too many mods installed. And now we're going to go over to transfer to target. I might have to... Yeah, so I have about 600 Delta V left in this stage, and then I'll have to drop it and go to the next one. Just warping over to the next maneuver node. Doing here, since they had to make that burn a little bit longer than was initially calculated for. And there we go. So we'll have to do another course correction maneuver. We still have plenty of Delta V. If you were going to be limited, you might want to do a little bit more of a work setting up that initial maneuver node. So we're going to want to set up a polar orbit, circular polar orbit with a apoapse of about 250 kilometers. Do a quick save there, and we'll warp right over to our encounter. And there we are. Yeah, so we want to go ahead, and we're going to go ahead and set up a polar orbit at about 250 kilometers. So we'll do this little... We can kind of ballpark the inclination, and we can always do a little adjustment afterwards where and Miss is so tiny it doesn't require a whole ton to change inclination, a whole ton of delta V to change inclination. So, all right, that's close enough there. Yeah, it looks like we'll need a... Just warping to this next maneuver node here. And just creating a node there to circularize our orbit. So I don't think it's going to be... It looks pretty close, though. We'll see what it is for inclination-wise. So we'll execute that node. We'll go over to our orbit info tab. Yeah, so 91 degrees, so that's not too bad. So we don't really need to... I don't think we'll need to adjust that. Alrighty. And there we go. Now we're in our final orbit. I'll go ahead and turn on our stability assist so we don't wobble around. It doesn't matter which direction these are pointed in, and we have plenty of sunlight and electrical power, so we can run both of them at the same time. If you have a smaller vessel that will not have electricity, or you're going to be limited with sunlight, if your ship's going to have to go in between the sun and the planet you're scanning for a significant amount of time, you may want to run one of them at a time so you don't run out of power and they don't shut down. So we'll go ahead and start that scan. You just right click the part and tell it to start scanning. And there we go. And then you can go ahead, you have a little active scanning window you can bring up, which will change as the scan completes, so we can go ahead and start warping here. Or you can look at your big map. Oh, we're still looking at Miss here. It'll show you your orbital path here. We'll switch over to biome. And it'll show you, and that'll fill it as it's completed. It'll only update when you have to manually hit the refresh button, but you can watch it populate on this little window here. Go back over to biome, and it'll tell you the percentage when it's complete. We can warp a little bit faster here. And there we go, 100% scan. Min-miss is usually pretty quick because it's tiny and you can warp pretty fast while you're doing it. So we'll go ahead and shut both of these down. We'll do our resource scanning. It's going to go ahead and transmit the data. I don't know if you can see it over here or if it'll be cropped off in the upper left. So you got science for that. Where's my miss? Oh, there it is up there. So then you'll get your relay. The default is for ore, but as I'll show you in a second. There's also USI MKS comes with the community resource kit, which adds a bunch more different resources that you'll need for building your colonies and producing materials and producing food and this kind of supplies. So we'll see. So you can go ahead and analyze data once the scan is complete. Gives you science, so you can go ahead and transmit that. Sure, I can run out of juice. Okay, we got plenty of juice. And there's that. Now we look at our big map of Midmas. Go ahead and refresh all of that. We'll turn off our orbit overlay. And now we can go ahead and see the different resources. So the 3 resources I'll be covering in a future video that we're going to need for doing life support with USI are substrate, water, or hydrates, and minerals. And we need those to make supplies and fertilizer. So we'll go ahead and take a look. We'll start with water. You select a resource. You can only view one resource at a time, but you can export these maps to a image file that you can view, and then you can set up a collage where you can see all the different resources next to each other to see where the best spot. So we have some areas of water. It looks like peaks around 6%. Look at gypsum next. Gypsum, we need to make fertilizer. So it looks like there's a pretty good distribution of gypsum. Hydrates are used to make water if you can't find water anywhere, which doesn't look like there's much for hydrates. About 3%, 1 to 3%. And substrate's the big one. Substrate's the most efficient way to make supplies for when we start doing our colonization thing. So it looks like there's a fair distribution for substrate. So yeah, so we'll do that. And so the next step is going to be landing our exploration missions to do more detailed surface scanning to see what the actual concentrations of minerals or resources are in these areas. And that, yeah, so we'll hop over. I'll go back to the Space Center there. And we'll go take a look at the moon again, since I did that one earlier. Yeah, so the goals for the next video, we're going to be doing some prospecting. I think we'll be doing it Apollo style. I'll do a series of landings so we can figure out the exact concentrations. We'll do up-close scanning and also gathering some science, and then we'll be figuring the best spot to put our first base. In the next video, I'll also be going over just the core basics of the USI life support. It's pretty simple, but it only starts to get complicated when you're trying to make your supplies out of resources you gather on the planets. All right, I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.